Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan Willie. I'm with the International Cryosphere Climate Initiative, and today it is my pleasure to introduce Paula from EC Mode, who will be discussing today a climate resilient, multifunctional Himalayan landscapes. Paula?
Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bhavna Sangwan, Program Officer from EC Mode, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Cryosphere Pavilion. This event today on climate resilient multifunctional Himalayan landscape is jointly organized by EC Mode, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, and ETRI, Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and Environment, India. To begin this program, please allow me to welcome Dr. Gupchika Sharma, climate change and environmental specialist from ECMO, to give her welcome remarks.
Thank you so much, Bhavna. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this special session. Um, I would like to, just to begin with, in setting the context, I would like to mention that mountains hold, as we all know, a profound significance covering over one-fifth of our planet's land area and hosting approximately one-eighth of the global population. And these majestic landscapes harbor 25% of world's terrestrial biodiversity, encompassing nearly half of the planet's biodiversity hotspots. Now, their multifaceted nature offers a wealth of vital resources such as water, food, energy, biodiversity, minerals, recreational spaces, and of course, flood protection. Hindu Kush Himalaya, HKH, is a cornerstone providing invaluable goods and services to nearly a quarter of humanity. However, it also stands as one of the most vulnerable hotspots to climate change. HKH faces, as we all know, an alarming surge in extreme weather events, rapid loss of biodiversity, changing cryosphere, ecosystem degradation, accelerating disaster risks, and increasing vulnerabilities for the mountain and downstream communities. So, what is our focus today? Our focus today lies in spotlighting the restoration of these multifaceted landscapes and increasing climate resilience. We are here to discuss and identify ways for sustenance and prosperity in the HKH region. On behalf of EC Mode and AD3, I welcome you all to this important discussion aimed at securing a vibrant and sustainable future for the people and the environment of HKH region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipshika, for your welcome remark and setting up the context for this program. Moving on to the program, I would like to welcome Dr. Arun Bhakta Shrestha, Senior Climate Change Specialist from EC Mode, for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Bhavna. Welcome to this session. With great pleasure, I would like to, introduce this topic to you, which is on climate change-induced disasters and resilience building, um, and a little bit focusing on cascading impacts and also transboundary aspect. But then to bring in the context, just wanted to highlight a very well-known fact about this region, the Hindu Kush Himalayan region where EC mode works, is a multi-hazard environment. Multiple hazards happen at the same time, often overlapping. Climate change and variability is very strong here, happening very strongly. There is a very strong upstream-downstream linkage. What happens in the upstream does not remain in the upstream, so it transcends to the downstream and often across political boundaries. The connectivity is becoming a very important factor when it comes to disasters. And of course, governance, I think, is very important. Of course, local level government governance, but also the transboundary governance is very important because, as I said, of the connectedness, the upstream downstream connectedness. Um, Going a little bit deeper into the multi-hazard aspect, again here, The information about disasters in the region has been put in terms of number of disaster, number of deaths, and economic losses. Um, of course, this again tells that this region is, impacted by different kinds of hazards, but then some hazards are more important than others. And among all, flood and water-induced disasters are more common, which also we know are related to climate. So with climate changing, with extremes happening, again, water-induced disasters, including floods, are very much likely to increase into the future. And then there are not so much, studies in terms of what is likely to happen to the floods or the extreme in the future, but because those working in this area know that, projecting extremes is very, very difficult. But from what information we have, including the one I am showing here, shows that the flood intensity in the future are likely to intensify. And this study actually suggests that the 50-year return period flood is at least likely to double by the end of the century, indicating increase in the flood. Now, I will run through a few disaster, events, which really captured our attention, like the one in Chamoli flood in Uttarakhand 2021. Of course, the downstream impacts, including impact on infrastructure like hydropower, is very much there. But in looking at the cause, what we now know is that it is probably because of a massive, mass near to what is shown here as Ronti Peak there, around 700 by 500, mass collapsed, dropped around a kilometer. And that impact actually, created a heat that, melted the snow and created the flood, right? Very, very difficult to, kind of think of what has happened, right? So that is one. Uh, but then going back with time, Seti flood, 2012, that's in Nepal, central Nepal, around Annapurna area. Similar cause, that peak, which is zoomed in here, called Annapurna 5, also had a massive rock collapse. Yeah, and for many months and years, we actually did not know what actually brought the flood. But now, after the Chamoli flood, we think that again similar phenomena happened. The mass impact on, frozen ground and snow probably melted it and created the flood, right? So that's that. Very recently, there was another flood in Melamchi area, which is a classic example of cascading, disaster, where extreme rainfall, extreme for that terrain, which is above 4,000 meter, which is glacial environment, happened, which created a lot of runoff. A small lake, which was not dangerous lake, glacial lake, was flushed out. So the added, contribution from the lake actually went down with debris, with water, and created various cascading impacts like erosion, landslide, damming, and then subsequent, breaking of that landslide dam and deposition in the downstream, which actually washed out, a very popular, I would say, water supply project called Melamchi project, which has been under construction for many, many years, just was about to be commissioned, but then this flood event washed out the intake. Uh, Now, moving into this and talking about transboundary Gulf event, this happened in 2016 in a transboundary basin between China and Nepal. Now, that lake that you see is not the cause of the flood. The cause of the flood is actually that small dot B, which is tiny, tiny, tiny compared to that Seren Machu, which actually flooded out in 1981. Very small compared to any other big lakes we have in Bhutan or in Nepal or in Sikkim. But if you look at the impact, it is really, really devastating. This is an hydropower before the flood, and this is the situation after the flood again. And this is a transboundary flood. And then when it happened, the downstream part in Nepal, nobody actually knew that it was happening. So they were caught by surprise. Fortunately, people did not die, but on infrastructure, there was a major impact. Now, this is a different story. Very similar situation in the eastern part of Nepal called Tamakoshi River Basin, where a largest to date hydropower was just being commissioned, investment totally by internal funds from Nepal. But then there was a similar event. But then in this case, there was a very informal, yet there was some transfer of information to the authorities in Nepal. So they could actually take precautions, shut down the gates and all that kind of thing, right? It was not a formal early warning system, but even that informal communication actually helped to warn people to keep the infrastructure in safety so no major damage happened. I would like to request you to give attention to that factor. Now, here I go back in history and talk about two events. The Igong landslide dam outburst flood, which originated in Tibet. Igong is a tributary of Brahmaputra, and a landslide dam actually created a big, impoundment, which subsequently flushed out, and that created huge damage, including life, death in Arunachal Pradesh in India. Again, in this case, no information. Nobody knew. China was fully prepared. Nobody died. But India, no preparation, no information. A lot of people died. Similar thing happened in 2004. But then in this case, the information was shared. Again, so no people died in case of Parichu 2004. No people died. Of course, infrastructural damage you cannot avoid. So from the Tamakoshi case, and this case, shows that even some level of information sharing is useful, right? Now I come to another example, 2014, massive landslide in Nepal, right? Causing, block lake and all that kind of thing. But what I wanted to highlight is when we went to, Bihar state in India, what we learned was that because of this landslide, there was a big, hue and cry in Bihar. And there was a big rumor that this is going to burst out, and that would bring a 10-meter wave of flood in Bihar area, right? So now, those who are used to this kind of phenomena can easily tell that in a mountain impoundment like this cannot bring a 10-meter flood wave in plain so much far away. But still, there was rumor. But then, because they had connection with Kathmandu and other area, they called and kind of found out that this is not realistic. This is just rumor. And actually, there was, the authority was already starting, moving people out of the floodplain, the riparian area. So that also tells, having no information can be really damaging, right? Which creates lot of misconnection. So what I wanted to highlight is that having early warning systems are very important, right? Within a country, but also transboundary. But in case we cannot have formal mechanism, even informal mechanism can be very helpful. Like this one, the community-based early warning system, which we have piloted, put up in the southern part of Nepal, as well as in India. It's a very simple mechanism. And here, mostly the communication is based on people-to-people connections, right? So because there are a lot of connections between communities in Nepal and India in that area, this happens. So even a very simple early warning system can be very helpful, and we have a lot of examples of this simple system actually saving lives during disaster situation. But then, for larger scale floods, I think we need to think of a little bit more technology-driven solutions. For example, Ishimod is, working on systems like high impact weather analysis tool, which actually can, model the flood situation based on weather forecasting, which can be helpful at national as well as slightly bigger regional scale. And then we also worked in the past on a project called hydrological cycle observation system, Bhutan was also part of that, which actually promoted sharing of flood information outside the country to. So that is a little bit at a different level. But then what I wanted to share here is, um, breaking the vicious circle of mistrust is very important. And we are living in South Asia, and a region where mistrust is very, very strong. And that mistrust actually give rise to misconception and a lot of geophysical sensitivity. Geophysical sensitivity inhibits collaboration, right? If you do not have collaboration, you do not have complete understanding of what is happening, including the disaster-related information, which creates positive feedback, creates misconceptions, sensitivity, etc. So that is what I call the vicious circle of mistrust. It needs to be broken. That chain needs to be broken at some point. And what we think the way to do it is through, dialogues, discussions, scientific sharing. And that's another thing I would like to say is there are a few platforms we are supporting, like Upper Indus Basin Network, which is a platform of 4 countries sharing the Upper Indus Basin: Afghanistan, China, India, and Pakistan, which is functioning very well. And in other areas like Koshi, also we are supporting Koshi DRR Knowledge Hub between China, Nepal, and India. So this is pretty much what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. Basically, what I would say is that due to climate change and others, the cascading and complex, combined kind of disasters, multiple disasters are happening more frequently. Often these are transcending the boundaries. So we need to look at solutions. I think these are some of the solutions which are available, which have been proven. But as I usually say, they need to be scaled. They really need to be massively scaled. And for that, we really need, investment. And of course, the other scale is at national to regional, as well as having those platforms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Arun, for your presentation and for highlighting the key issues in the HKH and also the need to understand and respond to cascading impacts of the climate induced disaster in the HKH. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Eklavya Sharma, Strategic Advisor, Distinguished Fellow from ATRI, to give his presentation.
Thank you, Bhavna. A very good afternoon to all of you. We have just heard from Dr. Arun Bhakta Shrestha what happens in high mountain areas because of climate change and its impact is having a cascading impact downstreams. And when we say cascading, it is not just the rivers, but we have landscapes. And those landscapes are multifunctional landscapes. So one big impact generates huge disasters downstream. So this is something very important for us to understand and bring the bigger perspective of transboundary nature of the impact that we see in the 12 river basins that was mentioned here. Now, what I'm going to do is talk about the climate change resilience building, but looking more into the restoration of multifunctional landscape. And this is the context of work that is being done by Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment. We are also partnering with Bhutan and other member countries to work on restoration. So let me. Okay, it's going. It's going. So let me bring the context of India a little bit when we talk about the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And if you look at this, the upper slide shows the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, and then we have the Indian Himalayan region. In between, you see Bhutan and Nepal, which are in white color. So we have from east to west And definitely one very important thing is that if we look India, then Indian Himalayan region is 16%. So this is important. Two of the global biodiversity are here out of four, which the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. 60% of India's endemic species are actually in the Indian Himalayan region. And very importantly, the people who live in the mountains is 86 million in the Indian Himalayan region and 1.2 billion people in the downstream, which means also people in the Pakistan, in Bangladesh, they are also part of the downstream when we talk about the Indian Himalayan region. So that is a huge population. And we also see that India's 36% of the forest is in the Indian Himalayan region. So it's a huge contribution. Area wise, only 16%, but you see how much of biodiversity and resources are there. And so the Indian Himalayan landscapes are very, very important for downstream. So that is what we want to show. So we have IGF from Pakistan here, about 29 million hectare of forest actually with 1,783 million tons of biomass we see in the Indian Himalayan region, and that sequester 856 million tons of carbon in the forest. So that's a huge actually impact what we see. One thing from our side, very clearly, out of the four, three of the biodiversity hotspots are meeting in the Eastern Himalayan region. So my Asoka Trust has, our ATRI has been working in the Eastern Himalayan pass. So we'd like to focus more here to show how the multifunctional landscapes are important and how we need to go forward. And here is the hotspots of biodiversity. That means there are many endemic species here, and if they are lost from here, they are gone. Very much. And as per the Hindu Kush Himalaya assessment of 2019, we are seeing that if the current level of biodiversity loss is taking place, 25% of the current endemic species are going to be vanished by 2100. That's a huge alarming figure for all of us. Now, when we look at the Indian Himalayan region, we have certain environmental and social challenges and institutional challenges. I think this is also common to the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. But very importantly, I would like to mention about the last point on the environmental and social challenge is it's changing very fast, and there are multi-dimensional changes. It's not just climate change, but population change, migrations are happening, land use cover change. So all these are happening very fast, and they are impacting water resources, which was mentioned, and disasters very much. So where one that is happening, then definitely other components of ecosystems are impacted, the landscapes are impacted. Use the human part, the institutional part, if we see, still we have limited capacities in the mountains as compared to institutions are elsewhere, but the mountains are limiting. This is still a data deficit region. We have seen that still new species are discovered, so many every year from the Eastern Himalayan region, but see, mountain specific policies are lacking, and then investment in the Indian Himalayan region is very, very limited. See, very much, we are only 86 million people out of 1.4 billion. Voice of the mountain people is somehow very small. So we are not able to make, we need to really make a big difference. So when we look at the Eastern Himalayan region, then suddenly I think when we look at the multifunctional landscape, ecoregions are very important. And if you look at the ecoregions, very interesting, because of the elevational rise and change, we can see huge richness, but these ecosystems are already in a very difficult situation because the impacts are very high. So I will try to show in another slide how climate change impact is really creating problems in the Eastern Himalayan region. This is an assessment, if you look at, and the vulnerability index in terms of biodiversity, water, ecosystem, and human well-being, then you can really see the red part very much on biodiversity. See, it is the Brahmaputra basin and the lower hills and the Tarai region, and you can see even in Nepal side, it's really impacted. And then if you look at the Bhutan and Arunachal Pradesh, is still very much well intact in terms of biodiversity. In this assessment, it is coming very clearly. And Nepal is also in Middle Hills. The situation in terms of biodiversity because of community forestry increase. But when we look at the water, so being the Eastern Himalayan region, more rainfall, still the situation is not that difficult. But Bhutan is already facing some water problem. It's having a very good biodiversity, but in terms of water, I think there is a scarcity sometimes. So you can see the yellow part, which is a moderate situation. But in case of Nepal, water in Tarai is really a huge problem that has as a in terms of vulnerability index. Ecosystems, if you see, is also very interestingly in the Brahmaputra Valley, and then of course in the Tarai region, we see is a huge vulnerability for ecosystems. A lot of people they are depending on the natural resources, so there is a huge impact. But when we look into the human well-being part, overall, we also see it's the lower elevation people where there is a maximum number of population are actually impacted. So we need to do good. We need to have good multifunctional landscapes in the mountains to have better ecological or human well-being in the downstreams. So now, very much in terms of ATRI's work, we are focusing our work in Sikkim and Darjeeling areas. And you can see this is the Kanchenjunga landscape shared by three countries, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. There are regional cooperation also, very much looking into the multifunctional landscape. The importance, there are protected areas. The corridors have to be protected. And then, see, normally in the forest area, protected area, you are not allowed to work by the forest department very much, or no one is allowed to work. But there are some changes which is happening, which I would like to say. In order to have a really good multifunctional landscape, you need to also work in protected areas. Why? Because some of the species which are native have become invasive because of climate change, and the other good species are being disappeared. So in that context, we need to have a work inside the protected areas also. So this is something, and you can see that down there is a purple circle which we are showing. So if you want to have the good multifunctional landscape, the fauna is equally important. And this elephant corridor, which is coming from northeast India to lower part of Bhutan and coming to India and going to Nepal. So these elephants are moving here. Actually, we are working on with ECMOD, of course, in this human-wildlife interaction and conflict, and how their habitat has to be integrated in overall land use planning, so that the functions of elephant and elephant-related species keeps on moving. So this is something which we are doing. Now, when we talk about multifunctional landscape and to restore, I think there are four important values which needs to be kept in mind. So the biological part, actually is very strong in biological part, and we have a very much focus on biological. So biological integrity is very important in multifunctional landscape, and ecological part also. So when we say ecological, it is soil protection, it is water cycling, it is related to species relation. All these are coming here very much, and also relation of nature and people together comes in ecology. So this is important. But people are also very important component of multifunctional landscape. So aesthetic values. People go for tourism. There are lots of people that we have our sacred groves. So aesthetic is very important, and cultural and socio-cultural aspects. So these four values, if they are taken care in a given landscape in terms of our work, then that will certainly help to restore the multifunctional landscape. From our point of view, and what we are doing in ATRI's work is three major components in terms of building resilience, because the topic is also on resilience for multifunctional landscape. One is climate risk. So we are working on mitigation, especially looking into how we can really have carbon sequestration. So best land use, best systems, so that the carbon stock and then carbon finance is another area which we are looking. Adaptive approaches and practices. So there are many adaptive approaches and practices which needs to be really looked into if we want to have climate risk to be taken into consideration. And the last one, which is very, very critical and important, which we are going to have another session today, is on clean energy options and wide use of that. So unfortunately, India is doing very good in terms of energy transition, all those we are seeing, but in the mountains, somehow it is still very, very limited. We need to really improve here. Then building capacities, if you look at, so what we want to do for multifunctional landscape. So climate services, we want to build capacity of institutions, non-governmental organizations, then monitoring skill of technical institutions as well as the community institutions, then forecasting. When we say forecasting, that is in near term, but I think also looking into long terms of really doing the scenario building as we move for the institution scenario. After 10 years or 15 years, what will happen to this landscape if tourism is going to increase? Something like that, scenario development, and then based on that, do planning and then move forward. Early warning systems, which was mentioned earlier, then preparedness for all of this. And then definitely the landscapes are managed by communities. So community outreach is going to be a critical factor when we talk about partnership. Then, of course, government, private sector, business, then research institutions and communities, NGOs, all we come within that. Then community based practices is also which is very important. Then integrating science with policy and practice. This is very critical and important when we think of multifunctional landscapes. And then we need investment on future climate leaders. And Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology, we have academy and we have students, PhDs as well as master's level. So this is really a very important forte for us to invest on this. And then finally, this is my last slide, but I think this is a very important slide in terms of our restoration work. So it is easy to say restoration, exactly what we are doing. So we are trying to enhance area under conservation. This is number one. And number two is we also want to protect key indicator species in the landscape. And in doing that, very much looking into protected areas. So assisted natural regeneration. We are also looking into the corridor connectivity. You must have seen in Kanchenjunga, there are 19 protected areas, but they are not linked, fragmented. In the context of climate change, species shift, which was mentioned earlier in another session. How the species have to be given space. So suddenly we would like to do this. Both community and government forest management. So this will mostly happen in the corridor area, and very much we are very happy in the West Bengal Forest Department. Normally, people are not allowed to enter to the forest, protected areas. There now we are collaborating and working inside the protected area, wildlife sanctuary. Can you imagine? So this is the need that has been realized now if we want to move. Then we have high altitude areas, so conservation and management of rangeland and wetland conservation. Wetlands are the I think storages, natural storages for groundwater recharge and also for flood management. So that is what needs to be really built, and we are focusing on that. Then oak forest rejuvenation. Oak is a climax species in a given forest, and oak is no more regenerating. In that context, if we are able to regenerate oak, number of associated species are also going to be part of that ecosystem. So it's going to be a holistic, multifunctional component in terms of forest. That is the idea. Then controlling invasive species in forest restoration. One is the invasive species, exotic coming from outside, which we do have many of them, but now many of the native species are also becoming invasive because of the climate change. So other species are not performing, so that is the danger. And then, of course, in the corridor areas, agroforestry, climate smart agriculture. Then we have heard yesterday in India Pavilion, some of us were there, about springside and water management. I think that is very, very critical. And we are talking about very large number of springs in the so in the restoration, springs can be used for forest, springs can be used for agriculture, it can be also used for downstream if we know the flows and the contribution from the springs in the river flows. So this is the idea. And finally, also looking into human wildlife conflict. So for multifunctional landscape, I think in addition to what Dr. Arun presented, what happens in the mountain, cascading impacts below, but all the other landscape downstream need to be managed simultaneously so that such impacts can be also absorbed as we move down. So with this, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for your presentation and also highlighting how multidimensional changes have impacts on ecosystem, on water resources, and how disasters are frequently increased because of this, and also stressing the importance of having multifunctional landscape. I will now pass on the floor to Ms. Anuja Malhotra, Policy Manager from A3, to moderate the panel discussion on restoring multifunctional landscape and developing climate resilience. Over to you, Anuja.
Thank you, Bhavna. Um, it is my pleasure to be moderating this panel today, this afternoon, where we have a very esteemed and distinguished set of panelists from the various countries in the region. Thank you to Doctors Arun and Eklavya for these insightful and passionate presentations, highlighting the nature of the problem, what we need to do forward, and how Himalayas are so important for conservation and the climate change space in the world. Um, I'll first invite Mr. Ghulam Qadir Shah, who is the Inspector General Forest at the Ministry of Climate Change in Islamabad, Pakistan. He holds a master's degree in forestry from the Pakistan Forest Institute in Peshawar and a master's in environmental management from the Australian National University in Canberra. He possesses over 30 years of experience working on various aspects of forestry, biodiversity conservation, and so on. He has experience of managing various forestry and biodiversity conservation projects related to participatory conservation, management of mangroves, riverine ecosystems, and conservation of endangered species and REDD Plus projects. Currently, he is serving as the Inspector General of Forest and is looking after the matters for national coordination in forestry and biodiversity policy planning. He is the designated focal point of several multilateral conventions pertaining to forestry, wildlife, and biodiversity globally. This includes the UNCCD, the CITES, Middle Eastern Green Initiative, and the National Vulture Recovery Committee. He's also the ex-officio member of the WWF Board of Directors. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Before I ask you to take your seat, may I request you to give us some opening remarks? You've heard the two presentations before, which have highlighted a ton of challenges that are there in the region. And we'd like to hear from you, from your rich experience. What can we do going forward? What's the context of the challenge in Pakistan? What are some of the initiatives that the government is taking? And what can we learn from that? Over to you, sir. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this introduction. And first of all, I would like to thank EC Mode for extending this invitation to me and for attending this very important event. I also have heard the two presentation by the previous speakers who have set the context and indicated the linkages of multifunctional landscapes and how these are linked to one another. I think the situation, as was mentioned by a previous speaker, is almost similar in every context of the mountainous countries. And there was a mention of linkages, upstream and downstream linkages, which is, I think, very important for us to understand, and particularly very important for the countries like Pakistan. Anything happening in mountains has impact in the coast. Mountains are basically the source of water. Pakistan's entire economy is based on Indus River. So if anything happens to and the major source of the water to Indus is from these glaciers that are there in the mountains. They gradually melt and then the water comes downstream. Uh, Climate change is real. Science has, informed us, and vulnerabilities are different. But though, the countries like Pakistan and, some other developing countries, our contribution to greenhouse gases is less than minimal. But yet we are, most vulnerable. Pakistan faced, last year Pakistan faced severe floods in 2022. Almost one third of the country was underwater, and we did not experience this kind of situation before. Uh, for last 3 years, we have been facing consequent consecutive, extreme events in the form of heat waves, temperature rising to almost 53 degrees Celsius in some of the country cities, and also forest fire. And we faced forest fires last year, and that was associated with the drought. So we faced heat wave, then followed by forest fire, and then massive floods. So you can see within the same year we faced multiple, hazards, as was mentioned by the previous speaker. And in last, floods, we faced almost 8% of our GDP was lost because of the economic losses. The people were displaced, and 33 million people were affected by those floods. In mountain areas, we have glaciers like other countries. Almost there are 7,000 glaciers in the mountain region of Pakistan, and there are more than 3,000 glacial lakes that also occur in those regions. Some of these are most vulnerable, particularly we to glacial, lake outbursts, which are now happening very frequently because of increasing melting of glaciers and increasing temperature. So we face these glaciers, and when these glaciers, the tons of this ice comes down, and everything that comes in its way, it's almost washed away. So we are implementing a project which is called Glacial Lake Outburst Flood Project. Two projects, basically building resilience to how to mitigate impacts of these disasters. And under that project, we are working with the communities. There are multiple departments who are working. And map department is also working on establishing early warning systems, weather forecast. Some community-based ecosystem adaptation works are also going on, and we are basically doing vulnerability and risk assessment to identify the areas which are most vulnerable to these lake outbursts. Uh, Educating and making communities aware to actually get off from those vulnerable areas, and so that their lives and properties could be safe. Like many other countries, these areas also rich in biodiversity in Pakistan. So, as was mentioned by a colleague from India, that 36% of forest lies in mountain. Pakistan's 40% of forest lies in this mountain area, HKH region. We have some of, I think, very important and iconic flagship species like snow leopards, in, which are again occurring in these areas. Many species of ungulates are there. So anything happens to these ecosystems has not only impact on the economy, right from mountains to downstream to the coast. for us, even mangroves are very important, and mangroves thrive on fresh water. So there should be some quantity of fresh water flowing to the delta, and because of the changes that have occurred over the time. Previously, we had 8 species of mangrove found in the delta region, but now 4 are gone. So only 4 are left, and of these 4, Abyssinia is the predominant because it's more salt tolerant, so salinity has increased. So any freshwater flows into the mount in the coastal area, it has impact on mangrove, all the river ecosystems, riverine forests. We have a riverine forest like Tarai in Nepal. We have riverine forests on both sides of river Indus, which are again very important for not only for forestry uses, but also for biodiversity purposes. A lot of fish in river. So any reduction in flows in the river because of these climate related events had impact on the entire stretch of the river. So we have been doing some other restoration work, like particularly there's one program which is called Green Pakistan program. It's a national domestic funded program. It targets 10 billion plants, planting of 10 billion plants by 2030. And so far we have surpassed 2 billion 2 billion plants target, but we are continuing it, and it's all through domestic funding. We have also established a network of protected areas, including so many protected areas in the mountain regions, particularly where these are, very important endemic species. We are also collaborating with the FAO as well as, some other regional countries, particularly on creating a mountain partnership. I am sure you would also be part of that mountain partnership. So we are part of that, and we are implementing one project with support from FAO. University of La Spinza, Italy, is also part of that implementation support. Together with Afghanistan, Nepal, I think Albania, and Kyrgyzstan is also part of that initiative. So under that even project, we are doing vulnerability assessment of these areas and how we can do better planning and reduce the risks to the people and ecosystems. So I think there are multiple ecosystem services that are linked to these multi-dimensional landscape that was mentioned by Dr. Sharma. But problem with us is that normally we don't have information or understanding of the values of these ecosystems. That's, I think, the problem. So when it comes to the policy making, priorities, resources are not allocated in the same way as it is done for the other particularly hardcore engineering structures, because many of ecosystems services are invisible, which we cannot see. We did recently an assessment of ecosystem services. So normally in our national accounts, if we we do accounting of forestry, contribution of forestry to GDP, is reflected as 1% of less than 1% of GDP. But when we accounted for all the ecosystem services, the known ecosystems, not all, but at least all the potential ones that we calculated. So the combined value of those ecosystem services was 11.4% of GDP, against the 1% which is traditionally reflected because of all the marketable. So I think there's need for this kind of political awareness to be created among the decision makers, so there's more attention towards these ecosystems, and including partnership building, as was mentioned, with the regional level, regional partnership, local partnership. These are very important because future lies in these partnerships, and we need to work together to for a better world for now, our current as well as our future generations. So I think I will have to stop here because of time, and then we can have further discussion during the thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And especially to end on that positive note of partnering, collaborating, and working together towards our common goals in South Asia. Um, Next, I would like to invite Dr. Rajan Bhattarai from the government of Nepal. He started his career as an irrigation engineer in the Department of Water Resources in the government of Nepal in 2006. Since then, he has worked as a senior divisional engineer in the same department. During his long professional career, he has had a lot of experience leading projects, various irrigation projects in Nepal. Currently, he works as the Deputy Director General in the Department of Hydrology in the government of Nepal. He is also the hydrological advisor for Nepal in the World Meteorological Organization. He is involved in a lot of research activities, particularly in the field of flood hydrology. He has received several awards and fellowships, and his core area of research, interest, and expertise is in multidisciplinary water resources planning and management. He has received a bachelor's in engineering and a master's in water resource engineering from Nepal, and a PhD in civil engineering from the prestigious Tokyo University in Japan. Sir, I'd like to invite you for your remarks. Since we've all been talking about how rapid development, infrastructure development, and lack of planning and ecological sense in these ecologically sensitive areas, what are some of your thoughts about how we need to bring in planning, engineering, and water into the argument when we think about Himalayas?
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists and all the dignitaries from the different countries. It's my pleasure to be here and to share some thoughts about the Himalayas ecosystems and Himalayas landscaping. So thank you, and very nice presentations by Arun sir and sir. So yeah, we have. I mean, we already know that the Himalayan in the South Asia is the which is the which also called the water tower, is the fresh water reservoir. I like to talk it as a fresh water reservoir. And if we or if we lost this reservoir, what happens to the billions of the peoples living downstream? So as Arun sir mentioned about so many things about the floods, so I don't want to go through those type of the events that we are already facing. The glacier lake outburst first, landslide break outburst first, and its impacts to so many development activities that we are facing in Nepal. But I'm quite curious sometimes. Yeah, as he said that I have gained my expertise in the floods. But what happens if all the glaciers are dried up after 50 years? Because if we cannot maintain 1.5 degree that is here, below that, then even if we reach there, we lost the 50% of the glaciers. Many reports said that. So our development and our priorities for the short term, medium term, and long term, we should think about in all the links between these three parts. For my feelings, if we go to the short terms or even the medium terms, then these disasters like the glacier lakes are forming, and we have already experienced so many disasters due to the glacier lakes outburst, and also the landslide dam outburst. So the government is prioritizing to save the glacier lakes and to protect the downstream peoples. So I just want to mention that we already did some works as a good example in Nepal. For example, like the Chorolpa glacier lakes, we make it more resilient and protective. And also, we recently we have concluded the finished the works in Imja, which also have a very high risks. And so these are long term and the short terms policies that we are intervening for the glaciers, but we should think about the drying up of glaciers as well. If we cannot, protect as your presentations, I have seen that there are so many ways to adopt and to be more resilient. So those practices is very important to save our glaciers in the Himalayas. So but still, the 2019, about 20 potentially dangerous glacier lakes are there. As a in one forum, I said that, oh, it's like a time bomb, just burst and millions of people die once. So it's like a bomb over there in the Himalayas. So we should think about to manage those the bombs, to diffuse those bombs. So we also have a request for the funding to the GCF for the 4 more gloves to be for the protections and what we did for previously. I hope the GCF will approve very soon. So but still we have 15 more such type of glacier lakes where we have to work. And another things, when I do the research in the field of the these glaciers and Himalayas, our scientific knowledge is also sometimes there is a gaps because of the very less informations, particularly to the glaciers and snow melts. And we need to have a very robust scientific evidence, scientific knowledge. That should ICIMOD is working on that field, and it's very nice to work together as a government with the organization like ICIMOD to have the very good research activities over there. But still, our people should, most of the times we learn the literatures from the outside, but we should have a very good in-depth knowledge about what's really happening over there. So that is the gap that we need to address. And also as Arun sir mentioned about the early warning system and transboundary issues, so that is very critical. As recently, we made a memorandum of understanding with Bangladesh to sharing of the hydromet, real-time hydromet informations and data to Bangladesh. And also from Bangladesh, we want to have the real-time, the typhoonic activities and monsoons. So there is an exchange of the data, but still we are working on how to have this exchange. Practically the exchange is happening. Currently, our policies from government is to share the data as much as possible for all the downstream countries like India and Bangladesh, especially to India and Bangladesh. And our web is free, and we have some real-time stations, around 400, and those are freely available in the web. So you can monitor our hydrological and meteorological activities very, continuously. But there is some barrier from our upstream neighbors, because of the language, because of the political or the social differences. As Arun sir mentioned in the presentation, that we got some information in the local level, from the local authorities to local authorities, somewhat like informal ways, but that is not enough. So we try to communicate with our upstream neighbors to how to communicate and how to share the timely data, because that is very important. Not only, I mean, we should go beyond the Himalayas also to sharing the data. And that is a very important part, because the cascading is not only for the small reach like Melamchi, but the cascading is beyond the Himalayas to Bay of Bengal. There is a very, I mean, the continuous impacts that we already see. So I don't want to elaborate how it's happening. So that is the key for the future resilient, to prepare the resilient system. And also our development activities, as she mentioned that nowadays, the rivers are key for the development. The highways are going along the rivers. The hydropowers are developing along the rivers, right? And the many urban centers are also in the along the rivers. So these developments should be done in the very well integrated manner of different streams in the government. That is somewhat missing in our policy. So if we make some integrated ways of development, what happens in the upstreams or whatever is in the downstreams, that will make more resilient. So those are my thoughts for now. So we will have some discussions more. But unfortunately, due to another event in 3:30, I may leave at 3:15 here. So please allow me. I'm sorry for not to have full time, but it's very nice to share my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. And we understand it will take 15 minutes to reach any other venue.
Yes.
Next, I would like to invite Mr. Rinshin Pendra from the government of Bhutan. He works at the Department of Environment and Climate Change at the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. He holds a Master's of Science in Natural Resource Management and has over 13 years of experience in environmental assessment and monitoring, waste management, and climate change. He has also been engaged in the formulation of various environmental legislations in Bhutan, including the climate policy, the national GHG inventory, and so on. Mr. Pendra, thank you. And we hope to hear from you about the context of Bhutan and your thoughts on regional cooperation.
Thank you so much for having us here to tell the story from a tiny country, Bhutan, a mountainous country. The total area of our country is covered by mountains. Almost 98% of the total area is under mountains, and at least 69.71% of our country is under forest cover, and 51% of our country's forest is protected for all times. Before I actually begin with the storytelling, let me take this platform to thank ICIMOD for providing us the continuous and very thoughtful and everlasting kind of support that being provided to Bhutan in terms of especially for air quality monitoring, capacity development, and more importantly for making some of our colleagues here to COP28. So you must have heard a lot about the mountains of Bhutan. If we compare our information and data, because of our size, our small size, just about 0.7 million people living there, it's not alarming, but for us, it is something very alarming, and that it's something worrisome that we always think of it. So we have around 567 glacier lakes in our mountains, and 17 of them are potentially dangerous. It can burst anytime. So, but by area wise, 1.6% of our total area is covered by glacier. And year by year, these glaciers are retreating even at the rate of 30 to 35%. And then this retreating of small and large glaciers are also retreating in different rate. And also, when we look at the aerial shrinkage of those glaciers in our country, the shrinkage is happening at the rate of 30 to 35 percent, or in a percentage, it goes up to 25 percentage in a decade. It happened in a decade. And the experts have concluded that the glaciers are melting because of the rising temperature, because of the climate change. And then we are facing very frequently the floods, all from the melting of glaciers triggered by rising temperature. And it happened in 1994. That was the most dangerous flood happened in the history of Bhutan in 1994. It took away the lives of at least 21 people. And then it incurred several millions of the damage to the property. And then back in 2014, 2015, the minor flood has happened because of the glacier melt. And in 2019, a minor one happened. And just recently in October 2023, it happened because of the avalanche. And then at least about 2 million cubic meters of water was pushed down and had to rush along one of our river systems. So, and then if that glacier lake is the most dangerous one, that the one I was talking about, it is called Totorme Lake. So if that bursts and cause a glow, the downstream damage is beyond Bhutan, of course. And it is going to be something that we cannot imagine in our own country, because our economy, the Bhutan's economy, is purely dependent on water, the glacial fed water. We have 2 mega hydropower projects downstream of those lakes. We have around 16,000 people living in there. At least 70% of our country's population is residing along the valleys of those rivers. Okay. So in terms of way forward, we have plans and programs for the 13th 5-year plan, which is going to commence from in about 2 to 3 months. So we are looking into construction of 24/7 national weather and flood warning center, including early warning systems, and also to enhance the weather and climate service in our country. So for now, I will end here. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, and especially for laying out the urgency of this discussion and why prompt action is necessary. Next, I would like to invite our final speaker on the panel, Dr. Vishwas Chitale, who is the Senior Program Lead at the Council of Energy, Environment and Water, CEEW in India. He leads the climate resilience team at the Council. His work focuses on assessing risks and building resilience. He has over 15 years of experience in developing and implementing digital solutions for climate change risk reduction and resilience building in various Asian countries. Before joining the CEW, he was leading the artificial intelligence program at the German Development Corporation, GIZ in New Delhi, where he worked on artificial intelligence for climate action in collaboration with the Government of India. He has also worked at the EC Mod in Kathmandu, Nepal for 8 years. He was also a member of the Niti Aayog's working group on the Indian Himalayan region, which focused on current gaps and challenges in data and information for informed decision making. Dr. Chitra, go first.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vishwas, and thank you to Isimod and Atri for giving me this opportunity to talk about, how this multifunctional landscape in the Indian Himalayan region are evolving. And just to take it from earlier speakers, uh, being a ex-Isimod, of course, we think about the region. We just don't think about our own countries. And I think I also like that we are talking about multifunctional landscapes across different countries in the region now. Because, see, in general, Hindu Kush Himalaya faces severe climatic risks that maybe no other region in the world faces. Also, at the same time, the complexity of upstream and downstream linkages between what happens upstream has a huge magnifying impact on the downstream population is something that makes all of us to think about the region as a whole. Just some things from Indian landscape. Of course, you might have seen the news in July, August, and September about Himachal Pradesh getting flooded, huge impact on the infrastructure, on people, on their ecosystems and livelihoods also. Things were just trying to get back to normal, and then again in the third week of July, again another flooding event happened. So now what is happening is, it's not only about once a year event. It's preparing for preparedness or building the resilience for a round the year preparedness. We might have flooding for a month of July. Then by August or September, people are starting to talk about drought situation. This year, in general, we have seen that the Indian monsoon has not performed that well compared to the past years, and we are doing some study at CW on Indian monsoon and its variability across past 5 decades. What we have seen is in the Indo-Gangetic belt, which is like the bread basket of India, and also a lot of things are exported to the other countries also. We see that the variability in the June, July, August, September, the typical we say northwest monsoon, southwest monsoon, is very high. There is a lot of up and down in the rainfall that is being seen in June. The rain already starts pretty late. In July it goes to peak. In August it's come down, and by September then hardly there is any rainfall. But also what we are seeing is the shift of monsoon towards October, November, December season. Northeast monsoon brings a bit of sigh of relief, but we will have to adjust to this new cycle of monsoon with adjusting our cropping calendars. Whatever people are doing as an implementation on the ground level has to be adjusted according to this overall climatic context. And this is something where a scientific organization plays an important role in communicating this with the decision makers, stakeholders at the local level, communicating this directly to the communities who are facing these challenges and finding out the new solutions. So, at CW, we talk a lot about this, that if you have not faced these problems in the past, you might not know about the solutions that exist. You might have to come up with new solutions to address these new problems. And that's where CW is also playing a lot of role within the Indian landscape. We would be happy to jointly, work towards addressing these risks in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Also, I was just following the global goal on adaptation. The recent text has come out today in the morning, which is really heartening to see that it talks about mountains. I think Nepal and Bhutan has done a great job there, getting mountains included in the global goal on adaptation. And it will be great if that text gets accepted, because mountains need specific attention. This is not just like any other ecosystem in the world, but there is a huge dependency of people on these landscapes. A lot of things are at stake, and this definitely calls for a specific attention. So global goal on adaptation gives all the Hindu Kush Himalayan countries an opportunity to make specific plans on locally led adaptation to address these challenges across different sectors like agriculture, food security, water security, also climate resilient infrastructure, habitat, and it also talks about cultural heritage. So there is a wide variety of things being covered in the adaptation sector. Also, unfortunately, so far everyone is so much focused on mitigation that adaptation, as in the earlier panel we heard, that is really being was so far sidelined. So global goal on adaptation also gives us an opportunity to bring it to the mainstream, get more and more funding in the adaptation projects, which is what I think multifunctional landscapes provide us an opportunity for holistically addressing these challenges as a whole in certain localities. So locally led adaptation is the key there. And then, of course, as we heard also from GCF and earlier panel, that they are looking for these kind of small local level projects, which will give an opportunity for them to fund at local scale. So national, subnational, of course, it is important to achieve the national and global targets, but something that really is needed in the region is action on the local level. And I think we all have a role to play there in order to develop these kind of projects that have implementation angle at the local scale, and that will really help us build the resilience of the whole region. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks. Since we need to wrap up soon, we don't have time for questions, but I will attempt at summarizing the remarks that the panelists made quickly, and then we all can connect offline and learn more from each other. The panelists spoke about the need for having sustainable multifunctional landscapes. How do we think about empowering local communities through data and knowledge? We also heard about various initiatives that the governments and organizations are doing for such data sharing and generation of knowledge. We heard about building resilient institutions and human resources that are capable of meeting these challenges that were outlined in the thematic presentations before. We need to work towards building a critical body of knowledge. We need to engage with the society for effective conservation and, of course, for just and sustainable development. We also heard about breaking down our goals and targets into shorter term, medium term, and longer term goals so that we are able to plan for it better and see outcomes that are more measurable and tangible. And finally, our panelists spoke about the need to share data using science for policy and practice, and most importantly, information sharing in the region, at the heart of which lies partnerships, collaboration, and cooperation among these entities. So on that note, I'm going to ask Bhavna to take it from here, and thank you so much for such an engaging discussion.
Thank you, Anuja, for moderating this session and also summarizing the panel discussion. Thank you, panelists, for your time and also sharing your reflection on the previous presentations and also sharing the major challenges from their respective countries. Now we've come to the end of the program. So to conclude this, I would like to call Dr. Prem Kanel, Chief Policy Advisor from ECMO, to give his concluding remarks.
Thank you, Bhavana. Distinguished delegates, I'm delighted to be here with you in this important session. In fact, I listen actually in easy mode, but I know what is this about. So I understand how it is working to restore the Himalayan landscape of India. It is really doing very good job. I congratulate to the team that for your initiation, because this initiation is very much aligned with the ECMOD vision and mission. Of course, India is one of the member country of ECMOD. We are doing the same tasks or works to build the Himalayan mountain region resilient. So we are working the same work. So thank you very much for that. And also, ATRI is the partner of ECMOD. Yes, we have done the MOU. Yeah, yeah, already. So we are very much partner and working together for the common goal. So thank you very much for that. And uh, so I listened to thematic presentation and also many remarks from the dignitaries coming from Pakistan, Nepal from Bhutan, and also India, and also from other people. So it shows that issues are in the upstream. Issues impact of climate change is more on mountain than the impact is in the downstream. So that is the key message that I realize. So for that, we need to restore, or we need to do something there in the mountain. So integrated landscape management is the best model. Integrated landscape management that look after the land, water, people, biodiversity, socio-cultural, like Reclamation mentioned on value of landscape. So all the dimension, all the component have to be integrated in the planning process. So this is the holistic planning process, and also so that we can address the key agenda of landscape. So that is what I understand, and also from the remarks received from many countries shows that there are a number of issues in the country and country's context. Many are common. Many issues are common in the countries, but issues are different. For example, in Pakistan, more than 8% last flood, devastated more than 8% of gross domestic product of the country. That is huge. That is big. So that is the biggest. Likewise, in other countries also there are other issues. So I don't like to repeat the same. So I think we understand the issue and opportunity. Also, we also realize the way forward. So in the part of way forward, we have to work together. Partnership is very much important because transboundary, implication. Because Arunji rightly mentioned that the cascading impact of climate change is very much transboundary implication, transboundary impact. Therefore, we countries work together. Therefore, Hindu Kush Himalayan region is very much important to work together, and ICIMOD is there. Integrated Center for Mountain Development, ICIMOD is there to support and to facilitate the regional member countries, to coordinate the regional member countries, to build the partnership among the regional member countries, because this is very intergovernmental organization. We are also working on data. Data gap is very a big gap, big issue of the region. For example, if there is the drought or a flood, for example, then if we have the mechanism to share the data from upstream to downstream, that helps to protect the people's life and also other asset. So that is one of the way that ICIMOD can support. So ICIMOD is looking to to formulate the regional level strategy to address such kinds of issues. So I think these are some of the way of working together. So let us work together, and ICIMOD is there to facilitate and to support you. Thank you very much for organizing this important climate resilient multifunctional Himalayan landscape event. So I thank you all for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ping, for your concluding remarks. On behalf of ECMOD and A3, I would like to thank each one of you for your time and participation. Before we end this program formally, we would like to call our panelists and also everyone to the floor for a group picture. Thank you.